have a look. Have a look at this. So this is a paper published in the Oxford Journal of Archaeology by Miles Russell. And it tells a fascinating story of misdirection, misinformation, all with the goal of publicity. Now, by and large, it talks about a character called Mortimer Wheeler. Now, Mortimer Wheeler and his wife Tessa did this 1943. This is just a quick snippet, but it was 522 page archaeological report on that just there, and it was indeed full of misinformation, and it was done deliberately. And to be clear, this wasn't based on lack of education or understanding. This was purely based on misdirection on a monumental scale. Welcome to the story of the Hill Fort myth. Can't quite begin to explain how big this place is. Not just its size, which is probably over 100 acres. It's almost a kilometre from one end to the other, but also the fortifications. It's like a maze. Here is the western entrance, and here I am in the year 2024, and I'm confused about the right way in. And perhaps that is where the story starts. Mortimer and Tessa Wheeler came here and excavated between 1934 and 1937. Each session they brought with them over 100 assistants, all with the view of unearthing the secrets that this 2,500-year-old fort had hidden. Okay, made it into one of the two entrances to the western side of Maiden Castle. Now, Wheeler wanted archaeology to be held in the highest esteem, but not only that, he also wanted it to be popular, because if it was popular, well, then all of a sudden there's funding options and opportunities. There was no such thing as government funding in the 1930s. Perhaps Maiden Castle here in Dorset, or perhaps that could be the solution to both of those desires. AD 43 saw the successful invasion of Britain by the Romans under Emperor Claudius. From Kent, they headed west and north, sweeping across Britain, barbarically destroying everything in their path. Maiden Castle was no exception. Despite its size and clear fortifications, the tribe here were clearly no match for the Roman army. The sheer scale of this place is absolutely ridiculous. Can't quite begin to imagine the work it took to build this. It's just vast. Tessa and Mortimer Wheeler came here. They had 2 or 3 years to unearth some of the secrets of this place. Everything they found really backed the notion of the Roman invasion, the brutality, the organisation of that civilization. AD 43 really was a brutal time right here. 1936, and sadly after the passing of Tessa, well, Mortimer found one of the most significant pieces to the puzzle here. He found the grave site with 52 adult males in, most of which had suffered significant injury. There's a famous image of a spine, a human spine with a projectile embedded in it. Perhaps one of the most persuasive points that Wheeler made was that the bodies were seemingly buried in a hastily manner. No real thought given to their position. It was clearly done at a time of great stress, a battle. Now, further evidence, should you need it, of the Roman brutality here in AD 43, well, 74% of those bodies found in the grave, well, they had blows to the head and the torso. But there was one more thing. For that, we're going to have to head over to the eastern side to further understand the brutality of the Roman invasion here. So here now at the eastern entrance, the eastern gate just there, there's 2 gates just like over on the western side, and pretty much right here I'm stood very close to the war graves that Wheeler confirmed were here. And to make matters worse, just up on the hill there towards the western entrance, well, there was a lot of roundhouses, and Wheeler had found they'd been burnt to the ground. If it wasn't enough that the Romans came here and brutally murdered, but they also levelled the place too. The Wheelers at the time were making leaps and bounds in archaeology. They had set up the Institute of Archaeology in London and were really bringing the discipline into the public eye. The excavations really played so well into this agenda. People flocked to the site to see with their own eyes, to see the history come alive, the brutality of the Romans upon their landing here. But what if I told you that absolutely none of what I've just told you is true? The Wheelers wanted the publicity and they got it. It was almost as if they were 80 years ahead of their time with regard to modern use of social media. He knew exactly what would bring in further funds, but you have to find something good, you have to find something of substance for that wheel to continue in motion. So this eastern entrance is almost as much of a maze as the western side. Now for me, this story is really fascinating because today the opposite is true with archaeology. Archaeology wants to protect itself, protect the sites, protect the information until it's known to be completely true, and that takes a long time. Professionalism reigns. So what exactly was wrong with Wheeler's theories? We seem to be onto the reasons why, perhaps, but how do we know that he was so wrong? It took until the 1980s for this one event theory to start being picked apart. Well, in the first instance, there was absolutely no evidence to suggest that the injuries and the trauma caused by those in the war grave were done so here. Absolutely none. It was well known, certainly here with the Durotriges, the tribe that were here before the Romans, that they'd practiced the use or the reuse of graves over a long period of time. Excavations in 1991, Niall Sharples detailed that instead of the bodies being placed here hastily and anxiously, they were in fact placed in an ordered and careful manner. Some of the grave goods placed alongside them were even still there. So you remember the stat that Wheeler had, the 74% of the male bodies found in there were consistent with injuries that were a blow to the head and the torso. Well, that stat is true. However, what's not true is it didn't happen all at once in one period of time. It happened perhaps over centuries, and that for me tells more of a sadder tale, that the tribes living here, well, they were certainly under more stress for longer periods of time. But what about the bolt, that bit of ballista that was found in the spine of that adult male? Well, again, there is no evidence whatsoever that that was Roman. Equally as much, there has been the same weaponry found in other areas on the island. It could well have been, and likely to have been, a native object. And finally, what about the burning of the roundhouses? The last act of brutality by the Romans? Well, no. Again, Sharples in 1991 concluded that the burning here derived largely from the workings here, the non-war related ironworkings. In fact, Neil Sharples, soon after his work in the 1980s, described this place as one of the most significant prehistoric Iron Age production of artefacts on the British Isles. Now that in itself should tell for quite a story. Now, as time goes on, evidence suggests that this place was long abandoned before the Romans came here, maybe 150 years, and perhaps when the Romans did arrive it would have looked just like the landscape it does today. Wheeler certainly came here with an agenda. He came here with a narrative, and everything he found he wanted to fit into that narrative, and it did for him. It seemed a little bit rushed, perhaps it's fair to say, but we don't take much away from Wheeler because he did a lot of work for archaeology in those early days and moved it forward leaps and bounds, and perhaps it did get that publicity it badly needed at the time. Who knows? If there was a battle, well, it probably wasn't here. I've been Paul. I hope you've enjoyed this little production. If you do, you can click on all the good links below, including our little Patreon, if you'd like to help support the channel and get some behind the scenes goodies. See you this time next week.